So picture this. It's the 16th century, and a French nobleman does something, well, something completely radical. He looked at a world full of heroes, saints, and kings and decided the most interesting story, the most worthy subject he could find, was himself.
And, this wasn't just some small idea. His Turkish translator, Sabahattin Eubolu, put it perfectly. He called Montaigne the first great leap of modern thought. I mean, we're not talking about just a personal journal here. This was a seismic shift in how we even begin to think about ourselves.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're exploring today. You gotta ask, right? In an age of epic battles and divine revelations, why would anyone decide to write a whole book about themselves, their flaws, their habits, all of it? And maybe more importantly, why should we care about it now, 400 years later? All right, so let's dive into this. To really get what Montaigne was doing, you have to understand just how bizarre his project was for the time. He wasn't trying to write an epic poem or a history of France. He was dedicating an entire book to just one subject, himself. And the amazing thing is, he tells you this up front, no hidden agenda. Right in his note to the reader, he basically says, look, what you're getting here is me. He promised to paint a picture of himself as he truly was. Natural, ordinary, just going about his day. No posing, no trying to be some kind of hero, just a guy trying to figure himself out on the page.
So that begs the question, right? Why this sudden dramatic turn inward? To understand that, we've got to look at the world's raging just outside his study, because it was anything but calm.
And this timeline, wow, it paints a pretty brutal picture. So in 1562, France basically explodes into these horrific religious wars. We're talking neighbor against neighbor all over religious certainty. And then, smack in the middle of all this chaos, what does Montaigne do? He's 38 years old, and he just quits. He retires from public life and locks himself away in his library. And then it gets even worse. The very next year, you have this St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, an absolute bloodbath. And it's right then, with all that horror fresh in his mind, that he starts writing. You see, this wasn't him just running away. It was a statement, a really powerful one. He was turning his back on a world that was screaming at him with absolute certainty, certainties that were getting people killed. And instead, he decided to explore the one place nobody else was looking, inside his own head. So this incredible journey happens in his library tower. And the vehicle he builds for this exploration is something totally new, a form of writing he calls the essays. You know, the name itself tells you everything you need to know. Essay in French means an attempt, a trial. See, these writings weren't meant to be the final word on anything. They weren't polished arguments or grand philosophical systems. They were literally attempts. They were experiments in thinking. And this is so key. He saw the book as a living thing. He wrote, I have made my book no more than my book has made me. Just think about that for a second. The act of writing was changing him as he did it. The book was making him, just as much as he was making the book. It was this 20-year conversation with himself. Exactly. His own life became the laboratory, and nothing was off limits. His moods, his health problems, he had painful kidney stones, his sleeping habits, his moments of sadness, his moments of joy, it was all raw material. I mean, get this. He was so committed to this self-experiment that he'd actually have his servants wake him up in the middle of the night, just hoping to catch a glimpse of his half-conscious dreaming self. Why? Because he believes something truly profound. If you can understand one person, truly and honestly, you can understand all of humanity. Okay, so after all this deep diving into his own mind, what did he find? What was the big discovery? Well, it wasn't some grand final truth. It was a question. Que sais-je? What do I know? That simple question became his motto, his guiding principle. And think about how radical that was. In a world full of people who were literally dying for their certainties, Montaigne's biggest takeaway was realizing just how little he actually knew for sure. And this right here, this comparison, it just nails the revolution he started. On one side, you have the world he lived in, obsessed with absolute truths, rigid rules, and constantly judging other people. But what Montaigne offered was the complete opposite. Instead of absolute truths, he gave us humble questions. Instead of rigid systems, flexible, open-minded thought. And most importantly, instead of judging others, he focused on understanding himself.
He basically showed us that real strength isn't about building a fortress of beliefs, but having the courage to question them.
So after years of living inside Montaigne's head, his translator, Sabahattin Ayobolu, said it all boils down to two core ideas. First, live as nature wishes. In other words, just accept yourself, your whole self, flaws and all. And second, be a slave to no book and no dogma. Don't let anything, an idea, a book, an authority, do your thinking for you. At the end of the day, it's about thinking for yourself.
And that idea, wow, that idea of being free to doubt, to question everything, it was like a shockwave. It would ripple out for centuries and completely change how we think. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at who he inspired. You have the great philosopher Pascal saying, hey, when I read Montaigne, I'm really just finding myself. Then there's Voltaire, who celebrated him as the man who knew how to doubt. And then all the way across the ocean, you have the American writer Ralph Waldo Emerson, who felt such a powerful connection that he said it was like he'd written the book himself in a past life. It's incredible, right? By being so honestly himself, he created a mirror where all these other great minds could see themselves more clearly.
So when you boil it all down, what's his legacy? It's more than just teaching people to think freely. He actually changed the whole point of philosophy. He basically said, listen, the goal isn't to write some brilliant book or win some clever debate. The real masterpiece, the most important work any of us will ever do, is to live our own life well. He turned the art of living into the highest form of philosophy. And that brings us right back to today. I mean, think about our world. We are swimming in an ocean of information, with everyone shouting their opinions, absolutely certain that they're right. So, in a world like this, what's the value in doing what Montaigne did, in just taking a step back, quieting all that noise, and honestly asking yourself, what do I really know?